surprise pet introductions if that needs to happen, or just a lot more flexibility. So we appreciate your flexibility and your support virtually as well. And also makes it honestly easier to buy the book because in person you might run out, and now you can just be like, oh, I need 10 copies to give all my friends and family, or 12, whatever. Don't limit yourself. So just a quick heads up on that. I'm gonna lead hard with make sure you get your, what makes a great Christmas gift, Hanukkah gift, holiday gift, birthday gift, whatever. So I'm Lelia from One More Page. I'll mention that at the beginning in case you don't know who I am. And I'm so happy to be here with Zack Smedley and Robin Talley, two phenomenal young adult authors, both of whom live in our area more or less. I think you're both Maryland, so it's like I'm still going to count that. I know it's hard for me to get to Maryland. I'm sure it's hard for you to get to Arlington, but
I'm in DC. I feel the need.
Oh, you are in DC. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Rob. It is an important distinction. We're doing a real DMV sort of thing right now. So I met Robin years ago, and I adore all your books. They're fantastic. Zack, I think I want to say that Robin, you actually put Zack's book on my radar, I think. Your first book, Deposing Nathan. So thank you for that. And thank you both for writing fabulous books. So I'm going to do a quick little introduction for both of them with a little bio for anyone that may not know that information about them. And then they're going to have an amazing discussion. And if you would like, you're welcome to leave questions in the comments. And towards the end, they can address some of those if you have anything you want to ask the authors. So Zack's new book is Tonight We Rule the World. It is epic. Zack Smedley was born in an endearing southern Maryland county almost no one has heard of. His critically acclaimed debut novel, Deposing Nathan, was a Kirkus Best Books of 2019 selection, an ALA Rainbow List selection, a Lambda Literary Award finalist, and winner of the 2019 YA By Book Award. Alongside writing, he has a degree in chemical engineering, from UMBC, and currently works within the field. He spends his free time building furniture, baking, programming, screenwriting, and tinkering with electronic systems. Zack, you are so well-rounded. I really want to. You should do a separate event where you build furniture while talking about your book. I'm just going to put that out there.
I've thought about doing that on like a live stream or something.
That'd be amazing. I would subscribe to that. Like build a chair and also hear about this book with amazing characters. Thank you so much for being here, Zack, and congrats on the release month for your book.
Thank you.
Also, I will include a link for everyone to order said book. Thank you for the prop, Robin. Perfect.
And I've got the final one.
It's such a good cover. I'm obsessed. Okay, sorry. Enough of my gushing. You're all here to hear them talk. Robin Talley, your latest solo book, I should say, is The Love Curse of Melody McIntyre, which actually will be in paperback, I think, in December is the current trajectory. But we have hardcovers. If anyone would like to order a hardcover right now, please do so. And I'm also going to just do a quick plug for Robin's Macbeth, contemporary boarding school Macbeth retelling, As I Descended, because it is October and you need a spooky book with some murder, and it is so good, y'all. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Okay, sorry. So Robin Talley is a queer author who grew up in Southwest Virginia and now lives in Washington, D.C. with her wife and their rambunctious kiddos. She did digital communications work for LGBTQ rights, women's rights, educational equity, and other progressive causes for 15 years before she turned to writing full-time, and is now the New York Times best-selling author of 7 novels for teen readers, including The Love Curse of Melody McIntyre, Music from Another World, Pulp, and As I Descended. Her books have won accolades, including the Amnesty Clip Honor and the Concord Book Award. They've been shortlisted for the Lambda Literary Award and the Clip Carnegie Medal, and have appeared on the Junior Library Guild, Amelia Bloomer Project, Kids Indie Next List, and ALA Rainbow Lists. Also, as somebody who submits to the Indie Next List, I'm so happy that Robin's books are getting recognized there. I also want to mention that Robin has contributed to some fantastic anthologies. So if you like short stories and you want to see sort of a variety, definitely check out the ones that Robin's been included in, including Toil and Trouble, 15 Tales of Women in Witchcraft, also a great Halloween read. All Out, there's a couple more. You can email me if you want a full list, and I will happily tell you all of them. And One More Page has them as well. So I am just so grateful to you two for being here. Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to hear your conversation. And again, if you have any questions or comments as a viewer, you can leave one, and the authors will, if we have time at the end, go ahead and answer some of those. So thanks so much.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you. So thank you, Lelia, and thank you to One More Page for having us. Very sorry we can't be there in person with all of you, but very excited to be here with all of you digitally. Please do, Lelia mentioned, but I want to encourage you, please do put questions into the comments because we can see them over here and we can either take questions as we go or do questions at the end, but either way, we want to hear from you. So please share your questions with us. And Zach, I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you as well.
Yeah, we were just saying before we got on publicly that like this is the first time Zach and I have like met. Like we have emailed and interacted on the computer, but we have not actually met each other despite living in the same area and both being queer YA authors because that is the nature of the world that we live in. You don't get to meet people.
Yeah, well, because we were, I think, gonna be at a conference together, and
we're gonna be at Novatine.
Yeah, and then the plague happened like immediately, like the next week or something. Yeah.
Long live Novatine. I hope we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exciting to be here and be talking about this book. Can you show us the book one more time? It has such a lovely cover. You've got such a pretty.
I actually have it with me this time. I didn't for my last virtual.
What is that? Is that a Junior Library Guild sticker on it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, lovely! So shiny and pretty.
Yeah, I guess I didn't update my bio with that, but yeah, it was a JLG Gold Standard selection.
That's great. And so it hasn't. It's not actually. When is the actual new release date for it?
So it came out October 12th, I want to say. Yeah, it got moved around a couple times.
Okay, sorry. I thought I got pushed back to later than that.
No, I don't blame you though. It feels like every book's getting pushed back later. So.
Yay! Congrats on it being out then. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you give us the quick elevator pitch for it?
Sure. So it's basically pitched as Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak, but for boys. So it follows a high school boy, Owen, who's dealing with the fallout after word gets out that he was sexually assaulted by one of his classmates. And it follows a couple different threads. It follows the school's investigation as they attempt to figure out who did it. Owen, who knows and is trying very hard to cover up who did it. And then his dad, who's a large, scary military vet who's hell-bent on finding out who did it. And it basically follows those threads as they intertwine and ultimately implode.
Okay. And it's incredible. So folks who haven't read it yet, I just finished it over the weekend, and it's, I read slowly. I just read slowly by nature, and it's largely because I just don't have much time. I have little kids, so I managed to squeeze in little bits of writing time or little bits of reading time, and I have to balance that with my writing time.
Right.
But so this book, I was reading it, and I was reading it, and I was like, this is really, really engrossing. And then I hit a certain point, and I can't say anything about the point,
right.
But I hit a certain point, and I was like, okay, well, there are still hundreds of pages left of this book, but I have to read them all right now. So it was the kind of book that I just put aside everything else that I was doing. It's like, I just have to read the rest of this book right now. Like I have to finish it. It's so good. It's so compelling. Like the writing is so compelling. The characters, this is a book about characters. The characters are just so incredibly compelling. So,
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But so since, there's a lot we can talk about with this book, and but I will say that since queer YA is one of my all-time favorite topics, I would love to start by talking about Owen's bisexuality. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting that he comes to understand this dimension of his sexuality in the context of a relationship that he's been in with his girlfriend, Lily, and they've been together for like the entirety of Owen's high school experience, from like ninth grade on. So I'm curious as to why you decided to structure it that way.
Well, it's my honest answer is it was sort of a reactionary thing on my end to wanting to do something really different from my first one. Because my first one is like all about bisexuality. I guess the elevator pitch for that one is it's about two best friends who are testifying against each other in court. And it's basically them in court telling the story of how they met and then got close and then got very close. But the main character has a very religious background and internalized homophobia and biphobia, which leads to their relationship fracturing and then them fighting, which gradually turns more violent. And then there's one night where they tried to kill each other, and that's how they wound up in court. And now they're testifying against each other. And in that book, the entire journey is the main character being like, I'm not bisexual. In fact, bisexuality is not even like a thing. And then it's his best friend yelling a bunch of stuff at him about how like, no, it is. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say, the main character eventually works out that he is, but it takes a little bit, basically the entire book. And so for this one, my starting point for this new book was like, okay, I don't want to do anything similar to how I did my first one, because then people are just going to compare them. So in that case, I still wanted to write a main character who was bisexual, but I figured, okay, let's go the total opposite end, where by page 3, it's established that that's what he is. He's totally comfortable with it. He's open and proud about it and all that. But then with how the book is structured, alternating between past and present, that still allowed me to include like 1 or 2 scenes where he's, you know, sort of exploring that and being like, okay, yeah, that's what I am, and now I'm going to tell people.
That's fascinating. And now I'm looking at my copy to see if it really is page 3. I think it's page 6.
Oh, okay, my bad. I don't have the
Yeah.
pages memorized. It's when the dad character comes into the office,
Yes.
and basically says, you know, this happened on the night my son came out as bisexual, and we should investigate if there's a connection with that there.
Yes, for the record, I was not fact checking you.
All good.
I think page 6 is equally as good as page 3.
Gotcha.
In terms of when your character is outed on the page. I think it's really cool. Because, yeah, that's something that gets talked about a lot and used to get talked about more because things have improved. But for a long time, there would be characters in books who you'd read in the book and be like, I think this character's bisexual, but the word would never be used.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, you know, there's a lot of readers who are, you know, maybe identifying as bisexual or something in that realm. And it's really helpful to readers to actually see the word on the page. And so it's lovely to see the word on the page so early and so frankly and so like not an issue-ly. So
thank you. Again, for any readers who like that, you will really, really like my first one, because that's literally 2 boys having long extended arguments where one's like, here's what bisexual means. It's this, this, and this. And the other one's like, or it could be this. And they're just going back and forth, because that first one really was like, I wanted to write a book that dissects that and breaks it down. But then, you know, book 2 here, we sort of evolve where, yeah, it's just like established and it's from the get-go, and then it's not really a factor in the story beyond just a trait of the main character.
Yeah, it's really fun to look at the different ways because, you know, because readers are coming at it from such different perspectives. So it's great to have a variety of different options and, you know, characters experiencing identity in different ways. Like, I wrote a book that was set in the 1970s, and it has a character who is bisexual, but who literally has never heard the word bisexual before because it's not a word that was used in the 1970s by very many people. And she has to have it explained to her in the context of like, yeah, you're bisexual, like David Bowie. And she's like, wait, what? And yeah, she has never, anyway. So it's just very interesting to look at the different ways that characters approach these things, because everybody's coming from very different places. Readers are coming from different places, characters are coming from different places, so it's cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's funny, I hadn't heard the word until I got to college. And then as soon as I did, I was like, oh, that's me. Yeah. Like there was no turmoil, or it wasn't a big deal or anything, but just, you know, I hadn't heard the word before. And so that's what led me to, well, I guess that wasn't why I became like a writer, because I was already writing by that point, but that was why I felt it was important to include it in books, for exactly what you're saying. Is for some folks, it's as simple as seeing it on the page. And sometimes it's even more impactful if it's just like not, if it's thrown out as not a big deal. It's like, oh, that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Some kids might learn that word from this book, and you know, and then they'll know it, and it'll be really exciting. It's a nice self-explanatory word too. It doesn't, you don't usually need to explain it that much. It's usually fairly clear from the word itself.
Yeah.
It was convenient. Not the case for some, but the case for that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so sorry, this is my fault that we've been talking about queer stuff, and we're already like a quarter of the way to our.
No worries. No worries.
There's a lot of other stuff in this book to talk about. So I would love it if you could share any thoughts about how neurodiversity is represented at YA, and whether that representation influenced your portrayal of Owen at all.
Yeah, so I myself am on the spectrum. Probably not easily able to tell. I always think that, but then some people have told me it is easy to tell, so I don't know. But yeah, it's honestly kind of like what we were just saying about bisexuality. It's like I don't want to write books just built around solely representation, because I don't like when books are sold that way, of like, get this book because it has this thing, and then that's the end of the pitch. I don't like that. But I do think it's important to include that representation if it's something, true to the self. Because for me, I don't want to get too much into like spoilers or anything, but a lot of this book has to do with like gaslighting, and there's a character who's challenging Owen and basically saying, "Hey, look, I don't think the thing that you say happened to you, and I'm not just, saying that. I have logic to back that up." And it makes Owen sort of question it, and I realized I couldn't write like that sort of subject matter without bringing the neurodiversity into it, because if I were in that situation, that's the only lens through which I know to approach that sort of discussion. Usually when somebody tells me I've said something, tactless, or gotten something wrong about a situation, my knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh, sorry, yeah, I probably did," because I'm so used to that. Particularly in high school, my friends had to tell me a lot, like, "Hey, you said something really like insensitive to that person back there, and like you should apologize." And it just became such a given to me, where it's like I was learning from other people, like what is socially acceptable and not, and like what the rules are. um but then that can be challenging, because in Owen's case, when someone starts, weaponizing that concept, he has to be like, okay, well, what is actually true and what isn't? And that can be challenging for anybody, but I think especially if you're on the spectrum.
That's really, really fascinating. That
Yeah.
it's really hard to talk about this because of spoilers, but like, I didn't. That adds a dimension to the book for me that I didn't. I mean, anyway. That's really interesting. It's a
Yeah.
really interesting answer. Thank you for explaining that.
I appreciate your caution with the spoilers, because I have to do the same thing when I'm like, I'm doing using half sentences, because I can't. Yeah.
It's really this book in particular. It's really hard. I was working on my like list of questions to ask you like as I was
Mhm.
reading it, and like for the first half of the book, it was like, oh, I'll ask about this and I'll ask about this, and I got to a certain point, and it was like, I can't ask about anything after this point.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah. Yeah.
because it didn't go away.
My first one, Deposing Nathan, does the same thing, where basically we can't really talk about anything after like page 80 or something, because it very much does the same sort of thing, where there's a couple of turning points and then they keep happening, and by the end it's about like a completely different thing than how it started. So yeah, I'm used to navigating that minefield when I talk to people about it.
All right, good. Well, hopefully this vagueness is intriguing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
folks who haven't read it yet. And if anybody has read it yet and wants to, like, I guess you shouldn't ask questions that are spoilers either if you have read it yet, and you have those things to ask. But I guess everybody else be careful with what you put into the comments.
Yeah, people are not careful, especially with my first one on Goodreads, when I made the mistake of checking Goodreads, which I know you're not supposed to do, and I don't do that anymore. But when I did the first time, like so many of the reviews were like, "I really liked spoiler, and I'm wondering about spoiler," and I'm just like, dude. So yeah.
Yeah, there's alas not terribly much one can do. But some people on Goodreads use spoiler tags, and we appreciate you. Not that I
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
Goodreads. I look at Goodreads for other people's books sometimes, not for me.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I appreciate the people who use spoiler tags there. Then you can make the choice whether you want to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Review spoilers. Like, I'm not on Goodreads very much, as should be the case. But so I also wanted to ask about the character. We talked earlier about how this book is a book about characters, and the characters are all like incredibly complex, and there's so many layers, and there's everything. I wanted to ask specifically about the character of Owen's dad, because he is really, really fascinating and really complex. And I'm curious if you could tell me a little about your thinking in creating that character.
Yeah, so it started, often when I create characters, they are stand-ins for concepts. And so I know with my first one, the character of Aunt Lori was like universally hated, and everyone just thought she was, pure evil. And really, she was a stand-in for organized religion, and the authoritarian manifestation of God and the Catholic Church and all that. Um, and with the dad character, he's basically a stand-in for the ways in which folks can impose their help to victims of sexual assault without considering what is actually preferred by the victim themselves. Because well, based on the extensive research I did for this, that happens like quite a bit. And so I really wanted to showcase that with the dad character. And the thing is, um, the book's not trying to take a stance and say, like, the stuff he does, at least early on when he's being helpful, is necessarily like wrong. Like when he's like having his kid get tested for STIs, like the book's not trying to say that like he shouldn't be doing that, but hopefully if I did my job right, it illustrates a really tough and high pressure situation from Owen's end, because there's so much that like his dad doesn't know, where if he knew it, he would vastly change how he's reacting. But instead, it's just sort of his dad being like, I know best, and so we're going to do it this way and we're going to solve it this way. And that's not always 100% the right thing to do.
Interesting.
Yeah, I also wanted to write another character who goes on long monologues, and in my first one, it was the best friend character who's lecturing the main character about bisexuality and stuff. And I knew if I wrote another character like that, there would be comparisons. So I again kind of went in a completely different direction and wrote a large, scary military vet with PTSD.
Yeah. He was really, really interesting. I have to say, I really liked him.
Thank you.
He, like, it's clear that he has a lot of things that he needs to work on and do differently, and yet it's also just clear how deeply he loves his family and is trying to do what is best for them, despite not always making the right choices on that front.
Yeah, there's definitely a few like comical moments. I'm thinking of like the scene where he's trying to teach Owen how to drive, where it's like, oh, you poor man, you just are not good at communicating.
Yeah. I felt for Owen in the driving scene. I was actually just thinking about that today. Is it a spoiler to talk about what happens in that scene? I don't know.
In the driving, no. In the driving scene, no.
So yeah, he like drives over and he gets flustered and he drives over like a curb and pops the tire and makes the tire like fizzle
Explode,
out. I'm not
yeah.
even sure what exactly it is, but I was reading and I was like, today I was driving and I don't like driving and I also get anxious when distractions are building up. And I was like, oh gosh, I could go over a curb. Like, oh, I popped the tire and I don't know how to change it. I have a baby in the backseat. I was like, anyway.
It's funny. I've done that not once but twice myself.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the first time was like day 10 of owning my new car. Not even my new car, my dad's new car. And I was driving it, and it was, I mean, my dad wasn't in the car. This was in college. I was driving it by myself, and it was the exact same thing. I was turning in somewhere, and I went up on the curb and then back down, and it exploded. And I just heard like, and then construction workers like on the side, they were like, "You're gonna get a whooping tonight, boy." I'm like, ah. So yeah. And then the second time I was driving in Baltimore City, and I don't know what I was doing. I just got too close to like a walkway or something, and same thing. Yeah, but that last one was like 5 years ago, and I haven't done it since. So I got him out of the way early. That probably wasn't where you expected that to go, but yeah.
No. This was not on my list of questions to talk about the scene, but oh gosh, okay. So switching tacks a little bit, I would love to hear about your writing process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because one thing that struck me in reading this was how carefully calibrated the information is that you're revealing. Because particularly in the first half, there's a lot that the readers don't know, and yet there's a lot that it's dependent. We can't know it. A lot is dependent on not knowing. And yet there's foreshadowing, and it's a very impressive balance. And meanwhile, you're also juggling two different timelines.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious about your drafting and revising process and how you achieve that kind of balance.
Well, it's interesting because for those who have read my first one, this one is largely the same. My first one is also told in two timelines, of course, one of them being in the courtroom and the other being the story they are telling. And that's the same deal where it's built around a couple of really big twists, and so it had to be very careful with how it parsed out information. The difference is for my first one, it just like came out of me, where it was like boom, boom, boom. and I'm a really extensive outliner before I like write anything. So I outlined the whole thing and then just wrote it for my first one. For this one, I tried to do that, and it kept getting like rearranged and reframed. Part of it is it's a rewrite. The original manuscript I wrote while I was in high school, um, and so I don't know if you've ever done a rewrite, but I don't recommend them at all because it was like it was kind of like trying to build a house from an existing house where you just take bricks out and then put new ones in, and then take other bricks out somewhere else and put new ones in until you have a totally different house. So this one was a nightmare, and it was the only time I've ever used a Scrivener to write, because then I could rearrange the chapters, and they probably got rearranged like I don't know how many times, but I know the whole thing got rewritten 4 times and re-outlined 18 times. So I'm glad you say that it feels very like precise, because it took a very long time to get there.
Yeah, and the answer is I have rewritten lots and lots of books. I've rewritten
Okay.
most books. Like there's very few that did not undergo significant like reworking.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I'm honestly scared to like ever do it again. Like I feel the pressure to get it right the first time.
I want to know how you get it right the first time. I know there are people who do that. I know there are
Mhm.
people who just sit down and like write a draft and like that's the book. Is that what you did for your first book?
Yes, that one I like toiled with the first part for probably about 3 months or so, and then one night in September, this is my senior year of college, I sat down and I got to the twist in that one, which again is kind of similar to this, where from then on I just had to like keep writing it. And I was basically pulling all-nighters, and I wrote the entire remaining like 300 pages of it in about 2.5 weeks. And that is like scene for scene what the final version of that book ended up being. So that truly was like just came out of me, I would say 90% the version that ended up getting published. So if you want to call that getting it right the first time, then I guess I did that, but that only made me like all the more plagued with fear and panic with this one, because it just kept again, I kept reworking it, and I was like, this is never ever gonna be as good as the first one.
Hmm,
So yeah.
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and Scrivener worked well for you? Oh, I guess we should say what Scrivener is. Do you want to say what Scrivener is for the
Yeah,
non-writers among us?
for those who don't know, Scrivener is basically it's a writing software, and the value of it is you can have like a sidebar with a list of like documents, and then you highlight any one of them, and the document comes up in the main window. So if I wanted to draft individual chapters, I could do that, and then if I needed to rearrange them in the document, it's as simple as dragging and dropping, rather than in like Microsoft Word where I would have to scroll and then cut and paste and scroll back up and paste. So yeah, I'm probably never going to use Scrivener again if I don't have to. I think I just have bad memories from it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Scrivener. I know tons and tons of people swear by Scrivener,
Hmm.
but it doesn't. I've had like 1 or 2 books where Scrivener was helpful, but for the most part, I use Word, and I just use like chapter headings that I can click it back and forth between if I have enough memory for that, and otherwise I just do search.
Yeah. So do you like start with Word always and then go to Scrivener if you have to, or have you just happened to use both in the past?
These days, I actually draft by hand first, and
Interesting.
then
The whole thing.
yeah, I do it in chunks. So
Wow.
I'll draft a chunk by hand on in like a legal pad, and then when
Uh-huh.
I hit a point where like my brain doesn't want to be creative, then I'll type up what I've got and I'll revise as I type, and then I'll
Interesting.
draft the next chunk by hand.
Huh.
Um,
So when it ends, you've written the whole thing like by hand?
yeah, the past couple of books I've done that way.
Wow.
This is a new thing for me. This is a since like mostly a pandemic era
Okay.
development.
Interesting.
Um, Yeah, before that, I was mostly drafting in Word, and the one I drafted in Scrivener was the one that was set in the 1970s, which also was convenient to be able to drag and drop
Right.
things back and forth. For me, usually that doesn't work as well because usually if it's a linear timeline, then it doesn't make as much sense to like
Right.
move things in that way most of the
Yeah.
time, or at
Yeah,
least on this
my new one has 3 timelines, and yet I'm still doing it in
one.
Word because I think I like it because I like writing it in the same order that the reader is gonna like experience it. Because like part of the challenge for like with this book is like the friend group in the original version, they were introduced in the present before the flashback where they like all got together. So I had to like find a way to rework that. And so I find it's easier if you just write in the same order that the reader's going to experience it, because then it avoids stuff like that. But yeah, hopefully I won't have to go back to Scrivener, because I didn't. It was fine, but I didn't have a good experience with it.
Well, the next book could change that for you. If you go back to Scrivener again in the next book, like, you find that you really love it as a process and it, heals you.
That could be. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't Scrivener's fault. So yeah.
And a lot of people have been deeply scarred by Microsoft Word and don't want, like, people, I know people who've lost entire books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because Word is just not novel writing software. It is like intended to draft, resumes and, business documents.
It's funny. I actually don't technically use Word. I use LibreOffice Writer, which is the open source equivalent of Word. And
yeah,
I also have a plugin I wrote with that automatically backs up the work. I think it's 4 times a day to a what's the word? Oh, differential backup on my network drive. So that way, like, everything exists somewhere. Also, I just don't like that Word makes you like sign in now in order to use it.
oh gosh, it doesn't make me sign in. Or maybe it would if I like ever closed it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think if you update it, yeah. So don't update it.
We have gotten super far into the weeds now,
Yeah,
and that
all
is
good.
100% my fault. But folks, I see we've gotten a couple of comments in the comments, which is lovely. If folks have any questions, now is definitely the time to put those in because we are happy to talk about any things that you would like us to talk about, including this book if you read it, or Zach's previous book if you read that one, or anything else that you would like us to talk about. If you want us to talk more about Scrivener, every writer I know can talk about Scrivener for hours, like whether you like it or not. Everybody has really strong feelings. So
Yeah.
we're happy to talk about that.
I had to change the source code of the Scrivener build I had because I'm on Linux operating system. I don't use Windows because, for the same reason as Word. And so I had to compile it as an app image, which meant that when it autosaved, it would like choke a little bit. So I would be typing and then it would autosave and my thing would freeze and then a bunch of words would write themselves automatically. So there's another reason that I'm not a fan of it, but I do know it pretty well.
Okay. What annoys me about it is just that if whenever I send something to an editor or anybody else, you have to export it out of Scrivener and into Word, and then they send it back to you, and they've always done track changes in Word.
Yeah.
So your only choice at that point is to use Word, or I guess you can use unless you know how to do the things that Zach knows how to do.
No, I just have to use Word at that point too.
Oh no, did we just
you froze a teeny little bit, but you're good now.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think my internet might be having some issues. Okay. Alice has asked us a question, I believe.
Oh, cool.
All right. Alice has asked us a few questions. Okay. So Alice says, okay, I've been thinking this over since I finished my ARC, the ARC being this advanced reader copy that I also have. And Alice says, but Zach, I read the author's note at the beginning of how hard this was to get through. So here's my question. How did you make yourself power through when writing just felt awful?
First of all, hi Alice. Second of all, I posted about this the night before it was published, but the answer is my reader messages / fan mail, because for some reason I wasn't like anticipating getting any when I wrote my first one, and then after my first one was published, I started getting it pretty regularly, and that was like, I'm not even going to attempt to describe how surreal that felt, because the reason I wrote my first one was to explore a lot of tough themes, and I myself have not gone through the struggles that my main character did in my first one. I've never struggled to reconcile religion and queerness, but I wrote the book for those folks who have had that struggle, because I wasn't seeing that in YA a lot. And so to get letters from folks who had gone through that and to say that my book had like helped them, and like one person wrote their college essay about me and it, and just that stuff was so real and so impactful to me that when I was working on this second one, a process that, to be clear, I hated, and it was during a pandemic too, when I didn't want to do anything, seeing those messages, I posted about it on Instagram, but I have this like big collage of them up on my wall in a frame that I put up. I think it was about a month after I became published, and I would just look at that like every day, and it would keep me going. And it's what allowed me to be able to write this. And honestly, now that I'm like done with it, I am incredibly happy that I was able to power through. And as I always say, I wouldn't be letting this go forth and be published if I didn't feel it was ready to do so and finally was of the quality that my first one was. Um, but yeah, it was not a fun road, as the author's note says. So I really appreciate all those reader messages.
That's great. That's a really good idea. I have a folder in my Gmail that I have a reader mail folder, and then I have a best ever reader mail folder.
Yeah.
But I don't like necessarily go through and click on those when I'm feeling like down or whatever about writing. And maybe if I had them printed out in a visual way like that, it would. I might copy you on this idea. It
Yeah.
sounds like because it can be hard. Writing can be hard sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like
Especially your second book. I don't know if you had second book syndrome, but I definitely did.
Yeah, well, I mean, my second book that was published was not the second book that I wrote, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it definitely writing after you've had a book published or even after you've had a book under contract is a very different experience than
Yeah.
writing before that.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you have mentioned your new book that you're working on. Does it have a publication date?
Not yet, and I don't know how much I can say about it.
I mean, it's hard
Unfortunately.
to describe your books in general.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Both of my existing two are about things that are not at all included in like the premise. And in fact, both of them I would say by like I said, probably like page 80, usually both of them turn into something like they're about something entirely different. This one, oh gosh, I don't want to be vague, but so it's going to be a contemporary sci-fi novel, similar to like Black Mirror. So it's going to be a contemporary book, but with this like new little interesting piece of fictional technology in society. Um, and it, believe it or not, it probably will be the most straightforward of mine, but it's still going to have two or three timelines and probably the biggest twist of any of my books, which I'm really excited about. So far, it's my favorite thing I've worked on. Um, so hopefully that continues, and hopefully that's reflected in the final product.
That's great. That's awesome. That's your favorite thing that you've worked on.
Yeah,
That's a cool thing to be able to say.
yeah.
And it's also pretty cool that you're saying it has the biggest twist yet. So that's something that you probably shouldn't be saying. But the fact it's encouraging though.
Here's the thing: is like I'm sure that my power is gonna run out on this eventually because with my first one, again, much like this one, it was written around a couple of twists, but I don't think anybody was looking for them. So I'm always told, I think there's like two or three. There's one really big one in my first one, and I'm always told that like people are like, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't, and I don't know why. And then with this one, I'm getting some of that, but I'm also getting some people being like, look, I read your first one, so I knew and I was able to guess, or mostly guess what it was going to be this time. And for my third one, I'll just say I don't think anybody could even if you're looking for it, I don't think they could guess what it is going to be. So
Challenge you're throwing out
yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah. But again, I'm gonna run out of steam. By book like 7 or 8, I'm not gonna be able to surprise people anymore.
I mean, they eventually get into M. Night Shyamalan territory, and people are just
Yeah.
like reading it. But we could go down a whole road of talking about M. Night Shyamalan, which we won't do. We already talked about Scrivener enough. But I will say that for me, my experience reading this, I got to the twist and I experienced the twist, and then I had to keep reading the rest of it. And then what was funny because when I put it, I got to the twist and then I put the book down and I was like, oh, okay, now I have to reevaluate everything, and I'm really surprised. But then I kept reading, and I was like, oh, I totally saw that twist coming. I convinced myself that I had seen it coming.
Yeah.
Even though when I first read it, I knew that I had not seen it coming. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Well,
there were seeds, but still, I didn't. Anyway.
right. Well, and
Just
I'm never gonna write a book where it's like the twist is a total pulling the rug out from under you, like cheap, type of thing. I want it to be where you can guess it if you're looking for it, but I want that balanced against like you didn't have quite enough information to like know. And I think again, there's a twist in my first one. That one's a little different because it's in the last like 10 pages. And so you do the reevaluation thing for like the entire book and it recontextualizes it. But something that I think is important, the difference between like bad twists and good ones, is that in a good one, even if you know it and can see it coming, it's still interesting from the perspective of like how it affects the characters in the book. So I feel like even if one of you guys is one of those people that like can just know by page 5 what the twist is in this one, it I don't think it at all detracts, hopefully, from the like way your heart is pounding when that scene's actually playing out
Yeah,
and
no, I think
everything's
so.
being revealed to everyone. Like it's still like, oh, so how are they gonna react? How are the characters gonna react to learning this, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I don't think it would take away from it at all.
Yeah.
Especially because once I like convinced myself that I had like known it was coming the whole time, I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, of course, because this anyway.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
risking saying too much, so I'm gonna note. I don't know if you're looking at the comments, but we're getting a lot of comments from Alice. I'm going to read some of them out to you. Alice said, "I just waved and forgot that we can't see Alice. So hi. Let's wave back. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Alice. I
That was-
appreciate your enthusiasm.
That was 8 minutes ago, so I apologize for delaying the wave back. At 7:38 p.m., Alice said, "Oh hell yes." I don't know what Alice was saying that in response to.
I'm sorry, Alice.
Sure, it was something good. And then at 7:39, Alice asked me a question and said,
Okay.
also, Robin, for someone looking to start reading your books, which one do you recommend starting with? And the answer to that would depend. If you asked me that in person, I would ask you about like what genres you prefer, because I've written in a couple of different genres. But I happen to know, I believe that you're a librarian. I believe that Zach indicated that. Is that accurate? Is Alice a librarian?
Bookseller.
Bookseller. Okay. Alice is a bookseller. Great. Alice replied that Zach's new book premise was the hell yes.
Okay, cool.
That's good. So as to which of my books to recommend starting with, as a bookseller, I'm going to recommend the book that I wrote that is about books, which is called Pulp, and it is it's also got 2 timelines. It's half historical, half contemporary, and it's about the lesbian pulp fiction genre of the 1950s, which were these cheap paperbacks that people used to buy at like train stations, and they were designed to be like, you read them once, then you throw them away. And there was this collection of these books that were lesbian romance novels. And so they were intended for like men to read on a train for like prurient interest, even though they were really very tame by today's standards. But to the surprise of the publishing industry, like actual lesbians started buying these books because it was the only representation in the 1950s of their lives. And so my novel Pulp is about a woman in the 1950s who's 18 years old and who discovers these books and like sort of finds herself through them and then decides to try writing one. And it also follows the parallel timeline of a girl, an out and proud lesbian, and living in the present day in Washington, D.C., who discovers this genre and like starts reading one of these books and like becomes obsessed with it and decides to try to track down this author and figure out what happened to her. And so it follows their 2 stories in parallel.
That book is sitting on my coffee table, but as are about 20 others of my TBR. So I'll have to read that one.
Thank you. That one was fun to write. I did not use Scrivener for that one, but in retrospect, I probably should have, because that was one where I was moving things around a ton.
Yeah.
Because it's hard with 2 timelines. It is difficult.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun, but it's difficult.
Yeah.
Of course, you've never written a book that didn't have 2 timelines.
That's true. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because my first one, again, it's structured pretty similar to the movie The Social Network. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's where it's people giving a deposition about like basically the entire rest of the story. So it's my first one's basically one timeline with, flash forwards every like 30 pages to the courtroom a year later, and then we cut right back to the story. So that was very easy for me to keep track of. This one was more challenging because this one is a lot closer to a 50-50 split, where there is not really a main like timeline in this one. I mean, there sort of is, but that also kind of shifts, where I think in part 1, the bulk of the chapters take place in the past, and then in the rest of them, the bulk of the chapters take place in the present. And of course, part 3 in this book is just one chapter. It's all over the place.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm eyeing the time, and I see that we are very close to the planned end time. So, Lelia, do you think we should go ahead and wrap up? Or?
Oh man, I thought I could come back and be centered. Yeah, it's so funny because when I saw Alice's comment, I was like, what would I recommend as like a good starting place for Robin's books? And I was gonna say Pulp. So I'm so glad that you did and that you got a chance to talk about it, because Pulp is amazing and everyone should read it. I told a stranger about it yesterday at the bookstore. But I'm so grateful to both of you for being here. And I honestly I could listen to you talk about Scrivener all day. I love hearing about just all queer YA. Thank you for talking and sharing and writing it. And especially for writing it with dual timelines, because honestly, that's really hard to do, I would imagine. And you both do it so well. I'm so excited for Zack. Your new one I agree with Alice's. Oh, hell yes. It sounds fantastic. I just ordered it. Thanks, Alice. Did you come to all of our events? Thank you. But anyway, you're both, I so appreciate all the work that you do and telling these stories and writing for young adults. It's so important, and your characters are so memorable and wonderful. So thank you for writing. Thank you for being here. And, I look forward to doing this again, hopefully with both of your new books, but no pressure. Like, it takes a while to write a book. I get it. I'm not trying to, be that person that finishes your book in 5 days and then it's like, well, when's the next one coming out? So take your time. And thank you to everyone who's watching. And again, I would just like to highlight that, a signed book makes a really good gift. Or just buy it for yourself, treat yourself, you deserve it. So I put the link for the event page, which has at the bottom, you can scroll down and see all the books that are there. Actually, I think they're all listed, including pre-ordering the paperback of McIntyre, Lucy McIntyre? I'm going to blank on. Now I've talked too much about Pulp. I can't remember Robin's other titles. Melody, thank you. So yeah, go ahead and buy all their books and revel in the wonder. And thank you both again so much for being here. So I'm going to say goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. And thanks again for watching, everybody.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.